What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with Justis Mosqueda, ready to, I guess, embrace debate, though not really, because, Justice, I am very much in your corner on this subject. Today, we're looking at traits versus production. And I know this does seemingly come up every year, but it seems to have really been drawn into focus this draft season because of a single prospect, that being Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher, who I know you have long fancied, and you've been on that train for quite a bit, another engine that you were driving, so to speak. But I did want to kind of break it down a little bit as far as I understand trepidation or maybe, the misgivings that Packers fans in particular might have about the idea of a college prospect who, tests right out of the gym. One of the most impressive tests, in Stewart's case in particular, one of the most impressive specimens we've seen in kind of the draft process, right? But you look at his college production and it is minimal. And I know you've gone on at length on Twitter about this, and I just wanted to give you kind of a forum here to kind of explain what you're thinking when you talk about the fact that, yeah, he's an athletic freak, and there's no doubt that the numbers when it comes to production have been minimal, but you seem to not be worried about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Like all of the numbers are bunk to me, not just the pass rush win rate and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also like athleticism numbers. I think those can sometimes trick you. Like you can look at a guy like Jordan Willis, who super athlete on paper, and you watch him on film, and you were like, this doesn't show up anywhere. He turns like a boat. How to get that 3-cone? I don't understand how
Right.
that matches up.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, like I just kind of use both vehicles to confirm my priors, essentially. And
Right.
really film is the big thing to me, because I mean, there's so many times that guys are played in odd positions. I think Danielle Hunter is probably the best example that I can give. So Danielle Hunter was a guy who played in a 4-point stance at LSU. He was not asked to get off the ball quickly. What do I mean by that? When do defensive linemen know when to get off the ball? A lot of times it's by, looking at it.
Looking
And that's
in,
why you see all
looking at the
their
snap,
heads
right?
turned at the snap. Danielle Hunter's defense was based off of tackle reads instead of ball reads. So he's not looking at the ball. He's looking at the offensive lineman straight ahead of him. He's in a 4-point stance, and he's not moving until the offensive lineman moves after the ball moves. So he was slow playing everything, and that was kind of like a run first based defense. Meanwhile, if you watch the film, even at LSU, he was this super athletic guy. He was like 20 years old also. And, he goes into the NFL and, he's one of like the most valuable edge selections in probably the last decade plus, right?
Right.
So I think everything deserves context. Like a guy like James Pierce Jr. running the 4.4 doesn't move me. He's a guy who's fast, and I don't know if he's explosive. You could look at his vertical jump, broad jump, all that stuff, and I don't know if it matches with this 40 time. So all these things measure pretty specific traits. Is another thing that I would mention.
Right.
But James Pierce Jr. is a guy who ran a 4.4, had all this pass rush production, but they were putting him in super advantageous situations. You watch Tennessee's defense. If they move a tight end, they're going to move their entire box. Their entire box will flip. It's
Right.
not, a linebacker will bump over with the tight end. It's our defensive ends are switching positions because that tight end moved.
To match
So,
up with wherever the weak and strong sides are.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So Pierce was allowed to be this weak side edge rusher from wide alignments where he's just chasing down stuff and they're maximizing what his really has one trait, right? It's his speed. And they were maximizing that. Now, what does that translate to the NFL level? To me, that's a wide 9
Yes.
third down edge rusher
Right.
who's running chase guy. But if you look at it on paper, he's hyper productive. He's got the athleticism. Why isn't this guy a top 5 pick, right? And I think that's where the Stewart stuff comes into the conversation.
Well,
Where
that's what I did want to kind of touch on that because you pointed out on Twitter, and I thought this was very, very smart. And it's something you and I have talked about offline before. But I think it lines up really well in Stewart's case in regards to the types of offenses that maybe not the majority of teams are seeing, but certainly the wave has changed in a big way as far as the number of actual pass rushing downs that a lot of these edge rushers are basically faced with, right? Where it's not some RPO on first down. It's not some thing where he's got to two gap, or he's even got to worry about the run, etc. The number of it's 3rd and 9, and he can pin his ears back. That I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but it certainly doesn't exist in the same way it did even 10 years ago.
Yeah, so like Tennessee specifically, and they're not the only team in the SEC that does this, but Tennessee barely got over 100 true pass attempts last year. And you're like, how is that true? They throw the ball around all the time.
Right.
Well, we're discounting RPOs, quick game, which if you're in the gun, which is the vast majority of college,
of the college, yep.
You're taking one step. That's
And the
one
ball's out
step,
of your
ball
hand,
is out.
yeah,
So
exactly.
defensive end's not going to be impacted by that. RPO, screen game, play action, I think is interesting because I think that matters defense to defense, which again is like the context thing. So like A&M, Shamar Stewart's not rushing the passer if he's seeing, a handoff. That's just not what they're doing. I mean, Nick Skirton was a guy who came into the season. He transferred out of Purdue. He had like top 10 hype, and I think he added a bunch of bad weight, which is probably why he ended up falling down some draft boards and stuff like that. But he's his teammate at A&M. You can't find a first round mock draft with him going in it anymore. Yeah. And that was a guy who was hyped up as this pure pass rusher and stuff like that. That's just not what they do at A&M. This is the same kind of goofy defense that basically had Edgerrin Cooper play as a quarterback spy, right?
Yes, right.
And we saw how that turned out with the Packers developing him this past year, hit the ground running in year one. College football is just not going to produce a lot of pass rushers. It's just not. I mean, you're watching teams like Georgia. They're only going to play one edge defender. They don't even have a second edge defender.
Right.
Because they're playing that guy in a 4-eye. They're playing
I was just going to say they have those guys on the ground on one, like over on half of the field, and then the edge soloed up wherever they feel the most advantageous matchup will.
Because they're just going to say, hey, we're going to play too high, and we're going to fit the run, and everything's going to spill to the edge, which is the opposite of what you've learned if you played high school football or anything like that. Everything is like set the edge, set the edge, set the edge. All they want to do is run outside. And all these college teams now are like, okay, well, we have to deal with all this RPO stuff. We want to play too high. We want to pack the interior box because all the RPOs are based off of inside run. I guess we're just only going to have one edge defender. And, it's going to spill, and we're going to just rally and chase to it when it does.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned rally and chase, because it's fascinating watching the tape on Stewart after I think it was a month ago or 2 months ago, where you asked, why are we not talking about him as a top 5 pick, which at the time you got a lot of pushback on, right? But it's like you turn on the tape and you talk about those where the ball gets into the quarterback's hands and then is out, like the one-step stuff, right? The quick game. So it's a smoke, or it's something out in the flat, or it's something quick where his initial, obviously, kind of 2 steps up to get after the quarterback until the ball's out of his hands. His reaction time and his ability to get inside out is shocking. I'm like, it's like blink and he's teleported to the perimeter. Like, that's something where, okay, you're talking about a lack of production. Well, that might not be a sack, but he limits the play. He's in on the tackle almost every time. So those are the things where I, as a fan, I get excited when I watch that tape. But I do, and again, I want to present the idea of the other side where, it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but man, you remember the stuff we went through when Rashawn Gary was coming out, right? And the worry there about, now that was kind of, clearly was working into a different scheme. He had been hand on the dirt. They were talking about, obviously the transition to a 3-4 outside backer, learning to stand up and things like that. But I get that, okay, the Packers are entering a season where they need instant pass rush help, right? They want someone, or fans want someone, who's going to come in and be productive right away and be able to win a one-on-one. And that certainly didn't happen with Rashawn, right? Like, it took a year probably of seasoning before he was really effective. Now he had a bunch of vets in front of him, right? But that, to me, I understand that trepidation. I don't see that being a problem for Stewart, though. That's just me. Like, if I look at how he wins when he is afforded the opportunity, I think he's got maybe not like more tools, so to speak, but I think he's got more athletic ability than Rashawn did coming out.
Yeah, I think he's a better prospect for sure. And it's the same thing with the people talking about LVN and stuff like that too.
Right.
Obviously, I
Well,
think
that's
a lot
another one
of
that's
that
going to get
comes
thrown at you simply because, I mean, that's a 13th overall pick who can't get on the field
right.
so far, right?
And I think he's a better prospect than both of them. I think one unfortunate thing, I mean, the Gary stuff, people need to understand that's a hit. And
I agree.
I understand people were like, well,
Yeah.
he's not Myles Garrett. Well, if that's, buddy, they're
That's your
turning in
benchmark,
every first
right?
round pick for Rashawn Gary if they get the opportunity.
Right.
And you need to understand that.
Yeah.
But I mean, just look at this is where it comes down to like coaching, and coaching matters. And it's like a bad coach can just ruin draft picks, dude. Sorry,
Sure.
that's what happens. You look at what Mike Smith did, where he got Rashawn Gary
A
developed.
good coach, by the way.
Yes.
That's a good coach.
Zadarius Smith came to Green Bay as a situational interior pass rusher.
That's a great point.
And signed a massive contract. And he ended up becoming a defensive player of the year type of candidate. But Revovich clearly did not have the goods, dude. And he hung out around way too long. And I've been banging this drum for as long as I think ever since I guess like Mike Smith left. Like
I was just going to say, yeah. But and he took over as the edge guy, right? And
yeah,
I think that was already a little too much for him. But man, once he was in charge of the whole front, problematic.
Yeah, and our defensive line coach prior to that was not good either. You know, the
Jerry
actual
Montgomery,
interior,
right.
Jerry Montgomery, he wasn't good either. So, yeah, dude, bummer that you missed out on LVN, but that's not a reason to not continue to take swings on athletic guys, especially at the position where you look at athletic traits and that defines starters long term.
Right.
Like, there's no position
hits, like you
that
said.
matters.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's the position itself and the effect it can have as far as being a premium position, right? Where we throw that word around a lot, but it is down to it's pass rushers, it's tackles, and it's corners. And those are the big three, right? Now, obviously, quarterback is its own element and its own kind of discussion. But man, you have to have them. And the better kind of blue chip type players you have at those positions, the more often you're going to win football games. And so look, and it's funny, we're going to talk about all this, and I joked with you on Twitter. Stewart's going to be gone by the time the Packers pick. That's my guess.
Yeah.
You know, at this point. And I do know he did make the visit, the 30 pre-draft visit to Lambeau. So it's promising. I like the idea. But I just think given his testing and what we're talking about as far as his tape, I'll be very surprised if there's a team in the top 20 that doesn't take a swing.
Yeah, I think they're doing their due diligence on a potential trade up is my assumption with
totally
that situation.
Possible, right?
But I want to go back to a point where people are like, just get the guys who are productive in college.
Right.
So then why are we trying to replace Kingsley Enagbare?
Right.
That's who he was.
Yep.
He was the hyper-productive non-athlete coming out of college. People thought he was going to be a second-round pick. He ended up falling down the draft. Why are we trying to replace him? Kyler Fackrell, extremely productive player at the college level.
Whew.
Why isn't he still playing?
What a pull.
Right? So, I don't know, man. This stuff gets goofy. Again, I think if you get away from the numbers, you start realizing what the traits are. And the traits with Stewart are, one, extremely good run defender already. You're going to get that day one. He improved as a run defender every single year that he was at A&M. One of the better guys that they graded for PFF, right? You're getting length, you're getting strength, you're getting a get off that is rare, where he's tackling guys at the mesh point in the backfield pretty consistently, even in the run game when it doesn't show up in the pass game, right? So it's going to translate there. It's just not what he's being asked to do. If you dig through the film, you can find the bend where he's doing Robert Quinn type of stuff at 6'5", 260, whatever he's listed at right now. Why don't you want that? You got a guy who super high motor, has some of the best chase skills that we've probably ever seen because of the athleticism that he has. He certainly needs to learn pass rush moves. But again, Mike Smith got that out of Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary. You can't just if you got a bad D-line coach, you got a bad D-line coach. You're going to have a bad D-line. That's just, it is what it is. I think, the way that college is structured, the way that the NFL is completely and totally hands off its talent pipeline until these guys are 3 years removed from high school. this is the new reality. You have to coach up defensive linemen the same way that you coach up offensive linemen, the same way that you coach up quarterbacks, where they're coming into the league and they basically have to learn a new sport.
I mean, that's
It
to
is what
me
it is.
the big key, and that was kind of why I wanted to highlight it because it is the jump is so significant at this point as far as, and it's interesting how this kind of permeates throughout the defensive side of the ball. I saw a conversation going on about inside linebacker, and it kind of made me think of Quay Walker and the idea of what he was being asked to do at Georgia versus what he's being
I mean,
asked to do
Edgerrin, just look
in
at
Green
Edgerrin.
Bay.
Edgerrin was
Yeah,
a
Cooper
quarterback
is a
5.
perfect example.
Yeah.
Perfect example. You know what I mean? It's like night and day about what he's being asked to do. What do you think? Getting back to the edge, let's say Stewart's gone, right? How do you think of how do you think about the Boston College kid as a consolation prize? Because that's a guy who I like his tape, and he has been productive, but he's probably a little light when it comes to the Packers' thresholds.
Sure.
But that's a guy who I think that I see value there. I don't doubt for a moment that they would at least consider him.
He is the hardest evaluation for me
Right?
in this
Right.
draft class. The player I compared him to was Chandler Jones, who is built nothing like what Donovan Ezerike is built like.
Mm-hmm.
Chandler Jones was a guy who had insane length, insane size. They do some of the same like Euro step pass rush stuff. He's not going to be a guy who's going to win instantly off of the ball, which is usually what those smaller guys have to do to survive at the NFL level.
He loves that inside move. He loves that inside.
Yeah, I mean, he sets up guy like it's a slow burn. It's it's an interesting type of player because you see this with guys like him, like an Alden Smith, Chandler Jones. Like it's usually longer guys. So like to see it in a smaller guy is really interesting. And again, like what does a smaller Chandler Jones look like in the NFL? I don't know. There hasn't been one.
How does he hold up? Right.
Well, to he's me, more of a slow burn guy. Which
to your point, that's the point I like kind of glommed onto watching him because I was like, you talk about Stewart needing to get coached up as far as his moves and learning a kind of a menu, right? This kid's got a menu. Like he's actually put some stuff together where I feel like, man, now the size is a real question, and I think that's why the Packers might balk, right? But man, you talk about a kid who really has a few things cooking as far as how to approach and set guys up and work to his strength versus their weakness. Like he's a fun eval. Like to your point, is a little like tough to see him in Green Bay, but that for me, if like Stewart's off the board and you need a guy who you think can come in and contribute and give you some pass rush help immediately, he's intriguing.
He's interesting. I do wonder if his like role long term is just like situational pass rusher.
Which makes it tough to think that they would make the investment early in the draft, which is where they would need to go. You know what I mean? As far as if they wanted to bring him in, I can't imagine them using a premium pick on a situational player. Like
here, this is generally how I view the class, right? So at the top, Abdul Carter and Shamar Stewart, I don't think they're going to be available. Right. Jalen Walker, I think, is actually a linebacker. I don't think he's going to be able to set the edge at the rate that he needs to in the NFL. I think his best situation is going to be like as a spinner, like situational pass rusher where you like walk him up to the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. Hopefully he ends up in a good home. That's really what you're asking for a guy like Jalen Walker.
It's so much of the draft, right? I mean, just situational. It is. Where you end up and what's the situation, what's the context. It matters it matters 10 times more than all the stuff we talk about prior to the draft.
Like Michael Williams is a great run defender. He's very athletic. I know he ran like a 4.7 or something like that. He's still overcoming the ankle injury. He's going to work out again for teams in about a month. It's like going to be like a week before the draft. He's not fully healthy. He played a bunch of 4-eye stuff. No doubt about him being able to stick on the field as a starter. I do wonder what his upside is as a pass rusher. My third defensive end overall probably will be Mike Green, the kid out of Marshall. He is the guy where, dude, he is flying off the ball. He can bend the edge. I know he's a smaller guy who played at a smaller school, but he plays better run defense than you would assume. I'm kind of out on Pierce because, again, I kind of think that he's like a third round pick to me. He's a wide 9. You can only really pay him on third downs, like run and chase type of guy. If you're starting defensive end is like a Zadarius Smith type of dude that you want to move on the interior, that's when you bring
Put
him
him
off
in
the
on it
bench.
or
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
all that stuff. Two interesting guys I'll bring up kind of as like day 2 picks are Braden Swinson, the kid out of LSU, kind of jack of all trades, master of none. Younger guy, still has some athleticism to him. I think he might get better at the NFL level. Like it's just there's nothing really limiting him. But he's just kind of like, B minus at like everything right now,
Right.
which totally fine.
Which,
If
and
he
he's
can
not a
get on the
finished
field,
package. You know what I mean? Like this is what we talk about, like the projection to the NFL and what is your potential development and growth. That's the important stuff, right?
yeah. And then the other guy that I would bring up, Princely, I think is the way you say his last name is Uman Mielian.
I've seen it written down. I've never heard it pronounced, and I applaud you for making the attempt.
The kid out of Ole Miss, he did not have he's not like a super athlete or anything like that. Didn't have a great combine. But I think that guy just knows how to rush the passer. And I would like him on my football team. So
Right. I'm all in on this idea. Anybody who can help in that regard is welcome in Green Bay. Justis, you're always welcome at Cheesehead TV. Really appreciate the time, man. We'll talk to you soon. Make sure you're checking out Justis's work at ACME Packing Company. There's a link in the description of this video for you to do so. Justis, thanks for the time, man.
yes, sir. We got the scouting report on Shamar Stewart and with a bunch of clips in it. If you guys want to see what the heck I'm
Let's
talking about.
go to augment the experience. Appreciate it, man.